here. They didn't really do a lot of agriculture because the land is not hospitable for this, but for grazing livestock and as pasture land, this land is rich, but people have not been allowed to go beyond their communities, beyond their immediate periphery of their houses to graze their livestock, because simply settlers will come and military will come and say, you're not allowed to do this. Then they are confined within their homes, and the livestock is confined within their barn that otherwise they could have got for free. So we're gonna go into one of these rooms where people today live in Marajat East and under the threat of demolition and displacement. السلام عليكم. نبلش. الله يحييك. نبلش عند سليمان بما انه هم تجمع اللي تم تهجيره في البدايه المهجر. معلش.
While Rami is getting set up, maybe we can just prompt with a question. So Suleiman and his family and 17 other families were displaced from Warajat East just last Friday. And so if we can hear from Suleiman a bit about what was happening in the community prior to their displacement, what led the community to be displaced, and what's happened to the community now in the last week.
سليمان، مثل ما سألنا قبل شوي يعني ممكن نحكي من جديد. شو اللي أدى لتهجير تجمعكم في المعرجات؟ شو الأساليب اللي اتبعوها؟ وين أنتم حاليا متواجدين؟ وكيف الحياة ما بعد التهجير؟
شوف، اللي أدى لتهجير تجمعنا يعني إحنا نحب نذكر إنه هذا تجمع عرب المليحات، تجمع كبير، تجمع تعرض لاعتداءات المستوطنين من 4 سنوات تقريبا. بس هاي المرة كانت في خطة ممنهجة ومرتبة بتهجير التجمع بشكل رسمي، إخلاؤه يعني بشكل رسمي. كيف؟ تم إنشاء بؤرة استيطانية داخل التجمع. طبعا بدك ترجم مشان.
So attacks on the community have intensified in the past 4 years. The last attack or the last significant attack that pushed everyone out from the community is the fact that Israeli settlers established a settler outpost in the middle of the community.
And can you please put the microphone closer to Suleiman's mouth so we can hear a bit better? Thank you.
طبعا إنشاء هاي البؤرة الاستيطانية داخل التجمع هي هدفها كان تهجير وترحيل السكان. كان فيها أعداد كبيرة من عصابات المستوطنين، كان مهمتهم الرسمية إنه الدخول للبيوت وانتهاك حرمات البيوت، إخلاء السكان من داخل البيوت، التصرفات اللا أخلاقية على مرأى السكان، التعري أمام السكان، الهجوم الوحشي وضرب الأطفال والنساء أثناء تواجدهم وتجولهم داخل التجمع.
One of the goals of establishing these settler outposts within the community is intensifying the attacks and diversifying how the attacks are taking place against the people of the community. Harassment, intimidation, physical assault, breaking into homes at night, in the day, and also something that we've been hearing recurrently recently, that settlers are showing nudity of themselves to the family members of the community. This is something that goes beyond just being abnormal when we're speaking about a Bedouin herding community that is conservative in the Palestinian West Bank. I don't think even in non-conservative communities this is something that can be handled well.
طبعا قاموا حفل داخل التجمع وقاموا بسرقة ممتلكات المواطنين. طبعا كانوا يتعاطوا المخدرات ويتعاطوا الكحول، وما بعد ذلك يتم هجمات شرسة أثناء ساعات الصباح على السكان والاعتداء على السكان وضرب السكان بطريقة همجية وبطريقة وحشية كما ذكرنا سابقا.
Something the settlers have been doing is drinking a lot of alcohol at night, taking drugs, and then assaulting us in the early morning hours. They would come to our homes, come to our houses, our barns, steal our livestock, steal the sheep, which is what people make living out of here, and insult them verbally and attack them physically.
طبعا إذا نتكلم ونتحدث عن موضوع عملية التهجير وأثناء قرار السكان بالرحيل، يعني هو القرار كان إخراج الناس من الخطر الذي يتواجد بأعداد كبيرة من المستوطنين بتصرفاتهم الهمجية، باعتداءاتهم الهمجية. توجهنا باتجاه الشرق من هذا التجمع اللي هو تجمع المعرضيات على منطقة تسمى العوسج. هي أراضي أوقاف إسلامية، هي ليس آمنة، ولكن أقل ذروة من المعرجات بالنسبة لدخول المستوطنين.
Where we have headed now is an area that is 7 kilometers to the east of Muarajat community. It's called Al Awsaj area. It still comes under Israeli settler violence and attacks. They still target the area, but it's still less exposed and less directly impacted than Al Muarajat. طب سؤال هم كان عندهم من قبل، شو السبب انه انتم بتتعرضوا لاعتداءات لكن ما في سلطة معينة تطبق القانون في حمايتكم هون؟
هنا يعني خلينا نحكي في فلسطين لا يوجد رادع للمستوطنين، بالعكس المستوطنين أو خلينا نتحدث يعني عن الحكومة المتطرفة الذي كان هو هدفها التهجير والترحيل الممنهج للسكان الفلسطينيين. يعني احنا ما نتحدث عن موضوع مستوطن او مستوطنين، احنا نتحدث عن خطة ممنهجة، جزء من صفقة القرن الذي أعلن عنها سابقا، هي تهجير السكان الفلسطينيين من هذه المناطق بهدف السيطرة عليها من قبل الحكومة الإسرائيلية. يعني هذا الشيء الذي يحدث الآن هي خطة ممنهجة ومرتبة، ليس بعمل للمستوطنين، لأن المستوطن يتلقى الدعم الكامل والحماية الكاملة من الجيش الإسرائيلي والشرطة الإسرائيلية بشكل واضح، حتى لا يوجد رادع قانوني الآن للمستوطنين أثناء عمليات الدخول أو أثناء الاعتداء، رغم شكاوي الفلسطينيين إلى المحاكم حتى إيجاد بعض التجمعات بتوكيل المحاميين الإسرائيليين، ولكن لا جدوى من ذلك، لا يوجد نتائج لصالح المواطن الفلسطيني.
My question to him was, how come this keeps happening, and how come these kind of crimes are carried out against him without any protection from police or military or any sort of authority to bring them accountability? His answer is that we have no protection and no way to call for help when these attacks happen. This is a strategic Israeli governmental plan that is aiming at displacing us, forcing us out from the land, and to take over, excuse me, to take over anything that the people own here in order to further expand their settlements. He has named Israeli ministers such as Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who have explicitly shared these ideas and announced them to the public.
Thank you, Rami. Maybe now we can turn to Farhan El Ghawanma, who is the community leader from Ras Ain Al Auja, and he can tell us a bit about what the community is experiencing now, and what the situation is, and the pressure that the community is facing to leave.
يعني هلا بما احنا حكينا مع سليمان، هم يعني واجهوا التهجير من كم يوم لسه، وانتم تجمعكم يعني للاسف يبدو انه يواجه بوادر التهجير او نفس او مسار مشابه. فايش ممكن تحكي لنا عن التجربه الحاليه اللي عماله بتصير واللي بتواجهه؟
اول شيء نرحب فيكم في قريه شلال العوجه.
First of all, we'd like to welcome you to شلال العوجة or راس عين العوجة village.
القريه هذه مقامه من قبل العام 1967 قبل احتلال الضفه الغربيه وضمها لاسرائيل.
This village exists since before 1967, before the West Bank has been occupied by the Israeli military.
يعتمدون في حياتهم على تربيه المواشي، ولا تقدم لهم اي جهه حكوميه خدمات او مرافق صحيه.
We depend mainly on livestock herding and livelihood from the land, and it's not a village that receives any infrastructure for sanitization or for sewage.
بعد اتفاق السلام عام 1994 وتصنيف المناطق إلى A, B, C أو ألف باء جيم.
Since the Oslo Agreement in the early 90s, and since the West Bank has been divided into Area A, B, and C,
قامت قوات الاحتلال بمحاولة اقتلاع السكان من المناطق المصنفة C.
the Israeli military and the Israeli government have directed themselves towards the policy of uprooting Palestinians from Area C entirely, which is 60% of the West Bank.
استخدمت أول وسيلة ضمها لاعتبارها محميات طبيعية وتجاهل وجود السكان فيها.
One of the first strategies they used is classifying large parts of Area C as natural reserves, which would be a pretext for forcing people out of them.
رغم وجود عين مية وآثار قديمة وأبيار مية ارتوازية.
في منطقة رأس العوجة. Despite that there's already an existing water spring in the area and infrastructure for the people to live in, residential infrastructure, this area has been classified as a natural reserve and people have been demanded to leave.
علما أن المناطق كلها نسكن فيها هي مناطق ملكية خاصة.
Knowingly that these are privately owned lands that we live in.
وحاولوا ترحيل الناس بهدم بيوتهم وصدر ممتلكاتهم بداية الأمر.
And they tried to displace people and confiscate their properties at first.
لكن فشلت كل هذه الوسائل في تهجير السكان وتغيير نمط حياتهم.
But all these methods have failed to displace people or change their way of life.
من 2019 ونحن نواجه هدم بيوت ومصادرة ممتلكات.
Since 2019, we've been facing a lot of home demolitions and confiscation of private property.
ومنع تقديم أي خدمات حياتية مباشرة.
And we being deprived from receiving any life-saving or life-sustaining services.
مثل الماء والكهرباء والمرافق العامة.
Like water, electricity, and public facilities.
علما إنه خط الكهرباء لا يبعد عن الخيمة تبعد 50 متر.
Knowingly that خط إسرائيلي. Knowingly that the main Israeli electricity line is just 50 meters away from the tent that we're sitting in right now, they're still deprived from accessing this electricity. This only goes to settlements.
خط مية من بير ارتوازي لا يبعد كمان 100 متر عن نصف التجمع.
And there's also a main water pipe that passes just 100 meters away from this community, and the people here are not allowed to benefit from it, which is only exclusively for settler use.
تجاهل العائلات وهو مكون من 130 عائلة.
Which has resulted in the complete ignoring of the basic services that are needed for the 120 people who live in this community.
واعتبارهم سكان غير شرعيين.
And they have been considered and looked at by the Israeli government as illegal residents.
بدأت الضغوطات بهدم المنازل ومنع إدخال أي مواد للبناء.
Pressures have been increased through demolition of homes and prevention of the entry of any construction material to the community.
لكن فشلت هذه المحاولات كلها باءت الفشل.
But all these attempts have failed to uproot the people.
فلجأوا إلى طريقة ممنهجة هي إيجاد بؤر رعوية استيطانية تمارس نفس نمط الحياة التي يعيش السكان.
So after the Israeli government have exhausted all of these methods to displace the people, the Israeli authorities have refuged to one strategy, that is the establishment of settler outposts in the area that are herding in their essence, which try to imitate the Palestinian way of life by herding livestock around the community.
بعقيدة أيديولوجية متطرفة.
With an extremist ideology.
تحاول اقتلاع السكان وإثبات أنهم هم الأصليين وأن احنا السكان غير شرعيين.
And through this approach, they try to prove that they are the ones, the rightful residents of the area, and not the actual residents here.
فقاموا في سرقة أغنام السكان.
And these settler outposts established around the village, they started to steal the livestock from the inhabitants here.
واستخدامها للرعي داخل التجمع.
They would steal their livestock and then they would bring their livestock and herd and let them graze between the houses of the village.
ومنع السكان الأصليين من ممارسة حياتهم الطبيعية في الرعي والعمل.
And to prevent Palestinian inhabitants from doing and carrying out these herding activities that they have carried out for centuries.
هذه العائلات المكونة من 130 عائلة لا يتلقون أي خدمة لا من السلطة الفلسطينية ولا من سلطة الاحتلال.
And the 120 families that inhabit this community, they do not receive any basic services from the Israeli government nor from the Palestinian Authority.
هذه العائلات تصارع من أجل البقاء
The families here are fighting for their existence
بعد اعتداءات المستوطنين المتكررة اليومية واعتداءات الجيش محميين بالجيش.
after Israeli daily attacks, settler attacks, and military violence against the community.
وعدم استماع السلطات الإسرائيلية إلى مطالب السكان أو شكاويهم.
And the complete ignoring by the Israeli authorities to the complaints and to the problems that are being faced here by the people in the community.
وعدم استقبالهم للشكاوى أو القضاء العسكري الإسرائيلي.
And their dismissal of any complaints submitted by the community to the Israeli judicial system.
بينما كل المواطن الإسرائيلي أو المستوطن كل الخدمات موفرة له بالحماية وكل الخدمات المياه والرعي.
Meanwhile, Israeli settlers receive all the basic services that they want from the Israeli government. The protection, the judiciary system is available for them, but Palestinians are blocked from it.
واحنا من هون من منبركم ناشد العالم إنه يقف مع حقوق الشعب الفلسطيني.
And using this platform, we call for the people and the audience to stand with the people of Palestine and their cause.
يحقق في البقاء والوجود والحياة الكريمة.
In their right to exist with a life that is dignified.
ونسعى لتدوير قضيتنا لسنا لأننا أكبر تجمع في الضفة الغربية بدوي يعتمد على ثروة حيوانية.
And we seek to internationalize our cause, as this community is the biggest and the largest community in the West Bank that depends on herding livestock.
أن أطفالنا يعيشوا بحالة سيئة جدا.
Our children live in very difficult conditions.
وصارت عندنا حالات إجهاض من النساء نتيجة الخوف الشديد من استفزازات المستوطنين.
And some of our women have faced abortion due to attacks and fears from settler attacks.
وفقدان نعمة الأمن والاستقرار.
And the sense of security and stability has been completely
نطالب كل حرارة العالم والشرفاء للوقوف والنظر إلى قضيتنا وتدويلها.
We demand the honorable people of the world to stand with us and to spread our cause.
لأن الإنسان عنده قدر من الاستطاعة إنه
and to sustain our ability to remain in this land.
ونشكركم جميعا.
And we thank you all.
أهلا وسهلا فيكم.
Welcome.
Thank you, Farhan, for sharing with us the experience of the community and its incredibly difficult circumstances that you and other communities in Area C are living under. And we're hoping that this press briefing will give an opportunity to shine light on the challenges being faced in the West Bank, the displacement crisis that we are seeing there, which has not gotten nearly enough attention over the last several years, as we've seen an increase in displacement. Next up, first, before I move to our next speaker, I just want to remind everyone that if you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you can identify your name and the outlet that you're coming from, we will give priority to people who identify themselves as such. So next, we're going to turn to Sarit Mikaeli, who's the International Director for B'Tselem, Israel's leading human rights organization. Sarit has been working in the occupied West Bank for years. And in the last 2 years, Sarit, you've spent much of your time providing protective presence to many of the communities that are at imminent risk of forcible transfer or have already been forcibly transferred. Can you please explain to us the patterns of settler violence, what the military is doing, and what you're witnessing in all of these communities throughout the West Bank? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Just want to make sure you can hear me. Great. Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to really speak in this forum. I'd like to say that, first of all, that my presentation is informed both by B'Tselem's research, very long-term research into state-backed settler violence and the forcible transfer of communities, and also from my personal activism. I've been doing protective presence now for about 2 years throughout the West Bank. And maybe first and foremost, I'd like to just second everything that our Palestinian partners and colleagues here have said about what they are experiencing. Everything they have said is correct. It's been documented both by themselves by Palestinians who are videoing and experiencing this, also by many other bodies. None of it is exaggerated. All of it is grounded in their reality. And it's a shocking reality because people like us, kind of like visiting Palestinian communities from outside, we're used to living in a situation where we will be receiving some sort of protection if we are threatened with this degree of violence. But the basic bottom line here is that in this community, and you can see Ras Al Ain behind me, I'll try and turn my camera as well. People here do not receive any protection from the only body that is responsible for that has any sort of authority, and this is the Israeli authorities. So you can look around me. If I'm pointing out the camera to this region in the south, we're looking in the direction of Morajat East, the community that has just been displaced last week, the former home of Suleiman. If I am pointing to the north, this is the direction of a recently established herding outpost that is blighting the lives of this community. If you look around you, you can see the community itself, where people, as described earlier by Rami, are living under the coercive environment. And essentially, what we're seeing right now is people who are basically left with no protection whatsoever. They are absolutely abandoned. And this means that when settlers attack them and they call the police, and I've been in these situations dozens of times personally and experienced them through our documentation, the police will not show up, or they will show up and then make up some excuse why everything that the settlers are doing is okay. The army will side with the settlers. The only Israeli bodies, and I'm clarifying this, there is no Palestinian authority that has any sort of capacity to provide protection to the people of this community. The only Israeli bodies are absolutely dominated currently by far-right Israeli politicians, do not provide any sort of protection. This, I think, is the basic situation for these communities, but we have to also clarify another important point, that settlers who are attacking these communities are not doing it because there's some sort of rogue element, or because they're violent, quote unquote, hilltop youth. They're doing it as representatives of the Israeli state. It's settler violence is a major informal tool that Israel is using to empty these areas around me of their Palestinian inhabitants. It's been extremely successful. Sadly, it's a very, very effective tool, especially because there is virtually no international criticism and censure beyond statements of Israeli policymakers who are enabling these policies. It's done overtly and covertly. It's done in a very blatant way now, although there are also elements of gaslighting and denial that Israeli spokespeople provide. But ultimately, this is the reality of the lives of some of the most vulnerable Palestinians in Palestinian society, as well as Palestinians who are living in communities that are bigger and more established villages. Because over the last couple of years, settlers have been so emboldened and have experienced literally no consequences that they are now threatening the access of established long-term villages to their agricultural land, for example. They're spreading over and expanding into areas throughout the West Bank, and attacks, very large-scale attacks, broad daylight attacks are a daily occurrence throughout the West Bank. This, as I said, is organized, funded, supported, has political backing and actual logistical backing provided by the Israeli government and all of its different branches. I'll only mention, and all of this has been documented extensively by human rights organizations, both Israeli and Palestinian, and by many other international bodies, including the ICJ advisory opinion. And the information is available. I just want to add one new data point that we learned about today, which is that the commander of the Israeli police force covering the West Bank, the Judea and Samaria, quote unquote, police force, has been quoted as saying that maintaining the settlements supersedes, as the goal of the Israeli police here, maintaining law and order. Essentially, what he's saying is that police have been instructed under orders to not actually protect Palestinians. And we knew this because we know there is a directive by Minister Ben-Gvir to stop any sort of protection, any sort of policing work into Israeli settler violence. But the fact that the commander of the Judea and Samaria police, quote unquote, is saying this, I think should really clarify to everyone that nothing about this situation is going to change unless serious consequences are felt by the Israeli policymakers who are making this policy, making this reality happen. So both people who control the policies, but also the bureaucrats and military officials who are implementing it. And this is our bottom line. I think it's not individual criminal behavior. This is systematic, and therefore the only way to end this and to protect these communities that are on the brink of displacement is to use systematic tools such as I said, specific serious consequences for policymakers. So I'd like to thank you very much, and I'm open to any questions from the media.
Thank you, Sarit. I'd muted myself. Now we're going to turn to our final panelist, Allegra Pacheco, who's the chief of party of the West Bank Protection Consortium. Allegra has extensive experience working with and in communities in Area C of the West Bank, and she also is a human rights lawyer. Allegra, can you, first of all, give us a little bit of legal framing around forcible transfer, which is a word that's come up a term that's come up several times today, and then talk about what the international community needs to do in order to protect these communities, and maybe just a little bit of mentioning some of the work that the West Bank Protection Consortium is doing to try and help prevent forcible transfer and help respond to communities that have been forcibly displaced. Thank you.
Thank you, Shana. The West Bank Protection Consortium is funded by 13 countries, and has been providing aid to 195 communities in the West Bank, mostly in Area C, to help them stay on their land and to prevent forcible transfer. The aid consists of all different types of humanitarian assistance. We estimate that out of 195 communities that we support, 90% are at imminent or high risk of forcible transfer. About 50,000 Palestinians currently are on the cusp of transfer. We're very concerned about this situation. We have to first look at the context in responding to your question, Shana. This occupied territory. Occupations are temporary. An occupying power doesn't acquire permanent rights, land rights, sovereignty, just by the nature or even a prolonged occupation. Everything it does must be for the protection of the local community it occupies. So therefore, it has an obligation to protect the Palestinians. In terms of the temporariness of an occupation, all permanent changes are prohibited, whether it's annexation, settlements, demolitions, etc. And of course, forcible transfer, which is the term of leaving people with no choice but to leave their land. That is absolutely prohibited in occupied territories. So we're talking about the West Bank. A, B, and C are all considered occupied territories under international law. The ICJ issued an advisory opinion last year that reaffirmed that the legal status. And so when we say the Israelis are not doing anything, the Israeli army, the Israeli police, they're not protecting these communities, it's not like, oh, they're doing a favor here. No, they are obligated under international law to provide this protection and prevent these communities from being transferred. I think also very important to note that we keep talking about protection and the communities saying it. There's no one to protect them. Their vulnerability is enormous. So we have the occupying power who's supposed to protect them and not doing a good job of that. The Palestinian Authority cannot enter these areas. We're talking about Area C under Oslo. The Palestinian Authority it does not operate, not allowed to operate in Area C. The international community, unfortunately, is not setting up any kind of international protective presence, which is very much needed. And then finally, if a Palestinian in these communities acts in self-defense, pushes a settler out of his tent, that Palestinian could be arrested, shot, and killed, and all of this has happened for engaging in self-defense to protect himself and his family. So Palestinians are extremely vulnerable at this time, and more needs to be done. I just wanted to give a statistic from OCHA, from UN OCHA, just to highlight the vulnerability and the dangers that this community is facing, that we're meeting today. So since May 2024, when a prior outpost had been established nearby, there were 120 settler-related incidents. So in the last year, and that is up from 5 incidents in the last 10 years. We see a direct connection between outposts, violence, and forcible transfer. I'll just give 2 more examples from UN OCHA. In the Ramallah area, where another community that we support, Mikhmas Bedouin, since May 2024, an outpost was established. There were 55 incidents compared to zero since 2006. And the list goes on. So again, the presence of these settlers is really the trigger to force people off their land. But we have to keep in mind that for decades, they've been living in what we call a coercive environment, where the policies of the Israeli government were basically made it very difficult for Palestinians to live on the land. Palestinians are not like us in the West. We go into a community, there's a house, there's infrastructure. No, most Palestinians come into a community, they build from scratch their homes, the water pipes, the sanitation, the roads, etc. So all of those kinds of structures need permits, and the Israelis have denied them for years. There's been a discriminatory planning system. And then and Palestinians receive demolition orders and have all their infrastructure destroyed. So it's been very difficult for Palestinians until now. The settler violence is really the last trigger in chasing them off. And I'm happy to post a victory map issued by a sanctioned settler pointing to this area of 37 outposts that were established, and basically celebrating the displacement of the Palestinians and expressing joy at the Jewish territorial contiguity that they've established in an area the size of the Gaza Strip. And then I just wanted also, again, to keep in mind that usually when there are Gaza ceasefires, which we all welcome, that the West Bank becomes the prize and the price, because generally the settler community and the right wing are not supportive of the ceasefire. So the compensation is expansion of settlements and these kinds of policies in the West Bank. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Allegra. And so just a reminder, if folks have questions, they should feel free to add them to the chat. We've already gotten some in, so I think that we will begin now with a question that's for both Suleiman and Farhan. This is